I guess where I am. Perfect. All right, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Great to see many of you here. I'm very happy to host the second installment of our Leaky Deltas webinar, where we'll talks from Zhao and Tom Bianchi. But before I'll give the floor to them, just wanted to say quickly to those of you who weren't there in the first time what this is. So and you see the people here on the screen, of course, with great help from OCB, from Heather and from formed the Leaky Deltas Club with the objectives to kind of build a community to study links between delta dynamics and marine carbon fluxes. Try to compile and prioritize some unresolved science that is still out there, and really to engage with you all to do that. And so to do that, we have a number of activities, including webinars such as this one every approximately 1 to 2 months. We'll have sessions at Goldsmith this summer and also at the AGU Fall meeting at the end of the year, and gatherings at some of these smaller community meetings like Systems or CMS or deltaic. We'll have a live meeting that we're planning to be in Baton Rouge early next year in spring of 2025. And in that meeting, what we will try to do is form a number of community papers, proposals, and just some general ideas that try to link delta dynamics, or the hydrology and geomorphology, with the carbon fluxes to and from the ocean. So really founding that leaky deltas concept. But before that, we of course want a lot of input from you. So Liz kindly helped with making a Menti poll. And so I think what we should do now is copy this code to you, go to menti.com, fill in this code, and then I think Liz can share her screen, and so we can see the result of the Menti poll.
Yeah,
so Liz, I'll
right.
cast it to you.
Oh, we're already getting some votes. Good. I'll wait just another minute before I share my screen so people can get logged in.
All right, I'll join the polls.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so you should be seeing now the poll results, and it also shows the code on the top if you were not able to get logged in yet. Pretty wide distribution. For the person who put 4 o'clock, is it 4 in the morning for you? Could give a thumbs up or type in the chat. It's very early. Okay. Well, let's see if we get a couple more respondents.
Put the link in the chat, perhaps that helps.
Mike, could you put the link in the chat for us, please?
I did that already.
Oh, perfect. All right, so it looks like we've got some Americans, maybe some Europeans. You can also type in the chat where you're calling in from, if you'd like. Then we can relate some of these data to the places. Some maybe from Eastern Asia, where is it 10 p.m. over there? All right, let's go on to the next slide. We've got another question for you. In or which near in or near which deltas do you work? And I think you can respond to more than one on this poll. We tried to set it up as a pin on a map and there wasn't an option for that, but if you can type it in, I think it'll generate a word cloud. Oh, very cool. Lots of variety in the answers here. River deltas. Yeah, that's a good one to work in. Deltas. Mississippi with a lot of representation here. All right, it looks like the responses have stopped coming in, so we're going to go, we have one more slide. And in this one, it's an open answer, so you can type in whatever you like. And the question is, what is a large scientific unknown for leaky deltas? And we're going to leave this slide up since this is the last one. You don't have to respond to it right now, but you can add your answers when you have them throughout the webinar today. And it also gives an option to vote on or like other answers, so we can see if somebody's already written something and you agree with it, you can respond to that. And that way we get a sense of ideas or concepts that are important to the community. So we'll leave this up. Let's get out of here for now, but please do continue to add your thoughts to this.
All right, thank you so much, Liz. Yes, the link to the Menti is in the chat. So please, if you have some more thoughts about large science unknowns, then put it there or just email it to us. We'll use that as an input also to the live workshop later. I'll go ahead and share my screen and I'll introduce Bin Zhao. Yes, here we are. All right, so today we had our introduction, and after that we'll have two talks, first by Bin Zhao, and then after that we'll switch over to Tom Bianchi. After the two talks, we'll have a joint Q&A for both speakers, so please stay until the end to get all of the science.
Yeah, can I interrupt really quickly?
Yes, of course.
So I see that with this last Menti question, it gives the option that I stop the point where people are entering responses and then the voting begins. So I'm going to leave this one open until the break midway through the webinar. So please put in your answers up until that point, and then at the midpoint in the webinar, we'll start the voting.
Great.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks for the interruption.
Of course. So I'm very happy to introduce Bin Zhao from the First Institute of Oceanography in Qingdao in China. I don't think, Bin, we ever met. We're on a paper together that's in review now. So this is a very good opportunity for me to learn about all of the things that you've been working on so far.
Yeah.
You got your PhD at the Ocean University of China, and after that did postdocs at the University of Florida.
And I have to interrupt.
Yes,
I'm a visiting scholar at the University of Florida.
Okay. Oh, so I'm so sorry.
At that time, I'm a PhD student.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I got that wrong. I'm
it's
sorry.
Okay. It's okay.
Okay. So visiting scholar at UF, and after that, a postdoc at the Ocean University of China before going to Qingdao. So sorry, Bin Zhao. And with that, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say. So I'll stop sharing and I'll leave the floor to you.
Thank you. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. Okay. Firstly, thanks conveners for organizing this webinar, and also thanks Dr. Shirley Roman for inviting me to give this talk. Today's talk is about the preservation mechanism of sedimentary organic carbon in the Changjiang Estuary. Actually, most of this work is done in the Ocean University of China during my postdoc. A part of this work is done in the first Institute of Oceanography of China, where I work now. Okay, let's start. As we all know, estuary and marginal sea are major hotspots for the barrier of organic carbon in the ocean. They only account for 7% of the area, but more than 80% of organic carbon could be buried there. And there are many factors can affect preservation of sedimentary organic carbon in marine systems, such as the organic carbon reactivity, interaction between organic carbon and mineral, and sedimentary dynamics. If the organic carbon in this system has low reactivity, and organic carbon is protected by mineral, and the sedimentary environment is stable, or the bottom water, okay. A lot of organic carbon could be buried in this area. But if this factor reverse, a lot of organic carbon could be decomposed. The organic carbon composition in marine system is very complex, and organic carbon from different sources have diverse reactivity. We usually use carbon isotope, biomarkers, and some thermochemical techniques to determine the organic carbon reactivity. In most cases, marine and biospheric organic carbon have high reactivity, but petrogenic and terrestrial organic carbon often have low reactivity. They also have different carbon isotopic composition. And in addition, organic carbon is often incorporated or absorbed into mineral structures. There are two key minerals for organic carbon preservation in marine systems. They are phyllosilicates and metal oxides. Compared to phyllosilicates, the metal oxides have lower content in sediment, but they are redox sensitive. This is because, like iron and manganese oxides, could be reduced in anoxic conditions. About 10 years ago, Lalonde found that there are more than 20% of the organic carbon is bound to reactive iron in the marine sediment. Here, reactive iron is defined as iron physics that could be reduced by diisonite. They are mainly included ferrihydride, lepidoxide, goethite, and hematite. So the preservation of sedimentary organic carbon could be promoted by reactive iron. Another factor is sedimentary environment. There are two kinds of continental margins. In active margin, river-derived organic carbon could be rapidly buried in the sediment. So organic carbon burial efficiency and OC loadings in the active margin are high. Here, OC loadings are commonly used to evaluate organic carbon preservation in marine sediment. However, in passive margin, river-derived organic carbon could experience long-time deposition and resuspension cycles. Organic carbon is largely decomposed. So, although it has high sedimentation rates, but the organic carbon burial efficiency and OC loading are low. Mobile mass are often found in some energetic estuaries in passive margin. These mobile mass are centers of organic carbon oxidation because physical reworking like resuspension and redeposition activities can promote organic carbon decomposition through the increased oxygen exposure time. Physical reworking in mobile mass also promotes ion redox cycling. During resuspension, pore water ion 2 could be oxidized to ion 3 and go to the bottom water. But during deposition, iron 3 could rapidly reduce to iron 2. So this circling continually provide iron oxide to the sediments, and the iron reduction becomes the most important diagenetic pathway of organic carbon remineralization in mobile mass. The Changjiang River is the largest river in China. Every year, it could receive large numbers of fine-grained particles, reactive iron, and organic carbon from the Changjiang. And we can see they are mainly deposited in the Changjiang Delta and the East China Sea inner shelf. So, sorry, I don't know why it's a stop. Okay, the sediment flux. The sediment flux in this region has large seasonal variation. In summer, the sediment flux accounts for more than 60% of the whole year. These sediments are mainly deposited in the Changjiang Delta, but during winter, because of the intensified coastal currents, these sediments will be further transported to the south. So the sediment transport pattern in this region is summer storage and winter transportation. This is also supported by radionuclide results. When you use long-lived radionuclide, the century-scale sedimentation rate in the Changjiang Estuary is about 5 centimeters per year. But if you use short-lived radionuclide, the month-scale sedimentation rate in summer is about 4.4 centimeters per month, which is corresponding to more than 50 centimeters per year. This means the upper sediments deposited in summer could be eroded during winter. Previous work also showed the depth of mobile mass layer in the Changjiang Estuary can be reached to 60 to 70 centimeters, and the OC loading is very low, which shows a very strong organic carbon remineralization in this region. In addition, the redox condition also changed in different seasons. The bottom water hypoxia can be formed in summer, but decays in autumn. So our scientific question is how this highly dynamic sedimentary regimes in the Changjiang Estuary influence the preservation of sedimentary organic carbon. For answering this question, we focus on 3 aspects. They are organic carbon remineralization, organic carbon and mineral associations, and controls on organic carbon burial. Firstly, we investigate the effects of seasonal deposition and erosion cycle on sedimentary organic carbon remineralization and oxygen consumption in the Changjiang Estuary. We collected box curve in summer and winter. We found in mud area, summer sediment curve has clear mobile mass layer, and its sediment porosity is high, showing that these sediments are deposited recently. But in winter, we can find that the mobile mass layer is disappeared and the sediment porosity is low. This indicates that the deep sediments get exposed by coastal erosion during the winter. However, in sand area, there are no significant difference between 2 seasons. So the inner shelf mud area are largely influenced by seasonal deposition and erosion cycle. There are also seasonal differences of bulk parameters in surface sediment between 2 seasons. Compared with the summer, the winter surface sediments in mud area are colder in grain size and have lower organic carbon content, reflecting the exposure of deep layer sediments in winter. We also measured pore water slope profiles in different seasons. In summer, the pore water dissolves in organic carbon, ammonia, and sulfate concentrations in the upper sediments layer keep relatively constant with depth. This indicates that the extensive of mobile mass layer, but in deep sediment layer, DIC and ammonia start to rapid increase with depth, and sulfates start to decrease, which means this deep layer sediments has been buried for a long time. But in winter, we can see the mobile mass layer is disappeared, and the DIC and ammonia start to increase in the upper sediments. This is also because the upper mobile mass layer has been eroded during winter. But for sand area, there are no significant difference between two seasons. Similarly, in summer, pore water iron and manganese is accumulated in the deep layer, while in winter, the deep sediments with higher pore water iron and manganese concentrations are exploded by coastal erosion. We also did a benthic flux measurement. In general, under aerobic condition, OC remineralization consume oxygen and produce DIC. So benthic DIC efflux and the oxygen influx should be similar. However, in summer, we found that the DIC efflux is significantly higher than oxygen influx, which means that the anaerobic OC degradation process is dominant due to the low bottom water oxygen concentration in summer. However, in winter, we can see it reverses. The oxygen influx is higher than DIC efflux. The additional sediment oxygen consumption in winter was likely due to the oxidation of reductive products like ammonia, iron, and manganese in deeper sediments exposed by erosion. The changes in sediment oxygen consumption throughout the year is called oxygen debit. In summer, okay, let's go. In summer, the prevalence of anoxic remineralization of organic carbon led to accumulation of inorganic diagenetic reductive products in the deeper sediments of mud areas and built up an oxygen debit. In winter, due to erosion of surface sediments, the exposure of reductive products results in higher oxygen consumption compared to organic carbon remineralization and the fulfillment of oxygen debit. Oh, I'm not sure why this. Okay. In addition, the eroded sediments during winter could be further decomposed in the water column. We also collected global benthic oxygen influx and the DIC efflux, and we separated them into 4 groups. They are estuary and inner shelf, outer shelf, slope, and the deep sea region. We found in estuary and the inner shelf in summer, the DIC efflux is higher than oxygen influx, but in winter, in other seasons, it reverses. So we think the oxygen debit is likely to be widespread in estuaries and the inner shelves on a global scale. From the part 1, we can know that seasonal deposition and erosion events greatly influence the bulk parameters in sediments and pore water slope profiles. And the winter sediment erosion in the Changjiang Estuary enhance oxygen consumption in sediments, and the oxygen debit is likely to be widespread in estuaries and the inner shelves on a global scale. In the second part, we focus on the role of reactive iron in the preservation of sedimentary organic carbon in the Changjiang Estuary. We measure the iron-bound organic carbon in estuary suspended particulate matter, SPM, and surface sediments in the Changjiang Estuary. And we found the fraction of iron-bound organic carbon in SPM is very close to mobile mass sediments. They only account for about 5 to 10% of bulk organic carbon. and they are largely lower than those in inner estuary and the shelf sediments, and also lower than the global average. This is likely because the rapid ion redox cycling in mobile mass may prevent reactive ion from bonding with more organic carbon. The interesting thing is, from river particle to mobile mass, bulk organic carbon and OC loadings largely decrease, but ion-bound organic carbon content and its fraction did not change or even increase, which means ion-bound organic carbon is preserved better than organic carbon which is not associated with reactive ion in this highly dynamic mobile mass. For the carbon-13 and carbon-14 values, we found the bulk organic carbon is composed of many sources like marine plankton, soils, and rock-derived organic carbon. But for ion-bound organic carbon, they are mainly associated with the pre-age soil organic carbon of terrestrial plant origin. This is also supported by the positive relationship between lignin and the reactive ion. Here, lignin is a biomarker for terrestrial plant-derived organic carbon. From this result, we can know reactive ion could protect plant-derived organic carbon for a long time, and even in this mobile mass. In addition to the isotopic composition of ion-bound organic carbon, we also measure the different ion phases in river particles and sediments using Musbore spectroscopy, and we separated 3 different ion phases. The hematite is a high crystalline and high density mineral. The superparamagnetic iron 3 is a polycrystalline and low density mineral. And the octahedral iron 2 is a ferrous phase in clay mineral or other silicate phase. And actually, both superparamagnetic iron 3 and hematite are reactive ion, but the superparamagnetic iron 3 have a significant positive relationship with the reactive ion extracted by diathanite, but there are no any chains between reactive ion and hematite. So the superparamagnetic iron 3 is the dominant ion phase in reactive ion. And another thing is, from river particles to sediments, we can see the reactive ion largely decrease. This is likely because the intense ion reduction in mobile mass results in loss of reactive ion. Another thing is because the ion-bound organic carbon and its fraction did not change from particles to sediments, which means the organic carbon and the reactive ion association is not broken. So we think the loss of reactive ion is mainly organic carbon-free reactive ion. And we also use the ratio of hematite to superparamagnetic iron 3 to indicate crystallinity of iron oxide. The higher ratio means higher crystallinity. We found that this HP ratio has a significant negative relationship with the carbon-14 value of ion-bound organic carbon, which means the high crystallinity iron oxide was largely associated with old organic carbon. This indicated that there may be a joint maturation process of reactive ion and its bound organic carbon. So the reactive ion and organic carbon could protect each other, and both of them are aged or matured together during sediment transport. Then we collected ion-bound organic carbon results in land soils in the Changjiang River Basin and deep sea sediments in Okinawa Sur to look at the variation of organic carbon and reactive ion associations from land to the ocean. Firstly, let's look at the bulk organic carbon. We found bulk organic carbon content decrease, but the carbon-13 value increase from soils to marine sediments, which means large numbers of terrestrial organic carbon are decomposed, and marine organic carbon is added to the sediment during this littoral sediment transport. But for iron-bound organic carbon and its carbon-13 value, we can see the firstly decrease from soils to estuary, SPM, and mobile mass sediments. This means a part of iron-bound organic carbon is decomposed during sediment transport in the Changjiang River, and only some organic carbon with low carbon-13 values could be selectively protected by reactive ion. From the above results, we know that these are terrestrial plant-derived organic carbon. Then, from the mobile mass sediments to the deep sea sediments, we can see the both organic iron-bound organic carbon fraction and its carbon-13 value increase, which means the reactive ions start to bond with more marine organic carbon. So from this part, we can know that iron-bound organic carbon is preserved better than organic carbon, which is not associated with reactive ion in estuarine mobile mass. And the reactive ion is mainly associated with the pre-aged soil organic carbon of terrestrial plant region in the Changjiang Estuary. And the reactive ion plays an important role in the stabilization and transport of river-derived terrestrial organic carbon. In the last part, we compare the controls on organic carbon barrier in the Changjiang Estuary mud area with other mud areas in the Eastern China marginal seas. And actually, there are 6 large mud areas in the Eastern China marginal sea. For coastal mud area in the Yellow Sea and Bohai Seas, they have high sedimentation rates, and their terrestrial materials are mainly from the Yellow River. And for the coastal mud area in the East China Sea inner shelf, they also have high sedimentation rates, but their terrestrial materials are mainly from the Changjiang River. And there are also 2 distal mud areas. They have low sedimentation rate, and they are formed by cyclonic credit. And because of this, their sediment will experience long distance transport before the final deposition. And also the organic carbon composition from Changjiang and the Yellow Rivers have significant differences. We can see the POC from the Changjiang River have higher content, younger in age, and comes more from plants. In addition, East China Sea inner shelf had higher bottom shear drift compared to Bohai Sea and Yellow Sea, which means the sedimentary environment in the Changjiang Estuary mud areas is more dynamic than Yellow Sea and Bohai Sea. From the distribution of bulk parameter, we can see the sediments in the mud areas have higher TOC content, finer particles, and larger specific surface area compared to other sand areas. And then we compared the change of organic carbon composition from river particles to coastal sediments in these 2 large river sedimentary systems. We found along the Yellow River sediment dispersal pathway, the TOC, carbon-13, and carbon-14 values all increase, which means marine organic carbon is added to the sediment during transport. However, along the Changjiang River sediment dispersal pathway, the TOC and the carbon-14 value decrease, but carbon-13 value increase, which means young terrestrial organic carbon is lost, but marine organic carbon is added to sediment. This is likely because physical reworking in mobile mass enhance the terrestrial organic carbon remineralization process. And there is a strong aging of terrestrial organic carbon process along the Changjiang sedimentary system. Then we estimated the organic carbon burial fluxes from different sources in mud areas of the Eastern China Marginal Sea. For example, the estimated burial flux of biospheric organic carbon in mud areas of the Eastern China Marginal Sea is about 7 megatons per year. This value is similar to carbon dioxide consumption flux by silicate weathering of all the large river basins in mainland China. So we think mud areas of the Eastern China Marginal Sea are important organic carbon sinks to draw down atmospheric carbon dioxide. And based on organic carbon burial flux and the input flux, we estimated organic carbon burial efficiency. We found in Bohai Sea the organic carbon burial efficiency are very high. This is because it has high sedimentation rates and its sedimentary environment is stable. But for Yellow Sea, we can see the marine organic carbon burial efficiency is very low. This is because it has a cyclonic coedis, which could increase the transport distance before this marine organic carbon decomposition, before marine organic carbon deposition. So we think a lot of marine organic carbon could be decomposed in the water column, but it also has very high terrestrial organic carbon burial efficiency. This is because the terrestrial organic carbon in the Yellow Sea mud area is mainly from the Yellow River. They are very old, and it's difficult to decompose during sediment transport. And in the East China Sea mud area, we can see both terrestrial and marine organic carbon burial efficiencies are low. This is because it has mobile mass and which can promote the both terrestrial and marine organic carbon remineralization. So from this part, we can know that the aging of terrestrial organic carbon in the Changjiang sedimentary system is more intense than in the Yellow River sedimentary system. And the Eastern China Marginal Sea are important organic carbon sinks, and more efficient burial of organic carbon in the quiescent Bohai Sea mud areas compared to East China Sea mobile mud. At last, I want to thank my collaborators. I'm not going to read their name, but they really helped me a lot. They helped me like paper writing, data analysis, and another thing. Thank you. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Vin. That was wonderful. I have so many questions, but I will keep them to me until our joint Q&A. But thank you so much for your interesting talk. So if you have any questions, please write them down, and also think about the Menti link, where you can think of large remaining unknowns and how they might relate to whatever was presented just now. Let me share my screen. Do you want to present, Liz? What could be a good order?
No, that's okay. I'll just mention for time that we have 10 responses now to the large scientific unknowns question. And so I'm going to close the response period, and you can start to vote on them, and then we'll revisit it after Tom's talk at the end.
Great, thank you. So let me introduce Tom, and then I'll give the floor to you, Tom. Also, Tom, I'm not sure if we ever met in person, but of course you have a very long and impressive history when it comes to coastal environments and carbon. Originally, if I have it correct, and apologies if I don't, starting with an undergraduate degree in biology, and from there moving on to ecology and the marine sciences at Stony Brook, and then in Maryland. Following that, positions in New York, in Texas, in Louisiana, and then in Texas again before being a professor at UF, where you are now, leading a large research group in the fields of organic geochemistry and biogeochemistry. So I really hope this was a good introduction, and I'm very, very curious to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, yeah. Let's see. Let me just share. Can you see that?
Yes, you can go to the presenter mode
Right.
for slideshow, right where your mouse is.
I'm trying to do that. Okay.
Yep, you might just take a sec.
Is that there?
Not yet.
Well, okay.
Great. Yep, and duplicate display right there where you are, display settings. Perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Are we there?
We are.
Okay, thank you. Yep, thanks very much for that introduction. Thanks to Liz and other people, and particularly Shaylee, who invited me. I'm very happy to be a part of this endeavor, and look forward to more interactions with folks here. I'd like to talk to you today about some sort of broader ideas that pivots off a paper that just came out last week that I'll tell you about in just a bit. And so a lot of the work is pretty much all over the globe, and it was funded by a variety of different agencies. Lots of people, postdocs and PhD, master's students, and so on in my lab that have been extremely impressive in what they've done over the years. So the outline goes something like this. So we'll start with this medium mud, as I've been kind of reflecting on in recent years, having worked in mud for many years. Looking at some of the pathways, storage, and so on, how the Anthropocene has impacted where you find this mud. And I'll refer to this mud as mud OC. And then finish with some other changes reflective of the Anthropocene and different decay dynamics, and with some emphasis a bit at the end on terrestrial derived mud OC. So I'll be talking about a few different types of proxies and bulk analyses. One will be compound specific isotope analysis. Another one will be using the ramp pyrolysis, RPO oxidation for some radiocarbon characterizations. Biomarkers, my favorite topic. We'll certainly talk about a few of those. And finally, some FT-ICR work that Pat Hatcher at Old Dominion was collaborative on that particular work. So that's a bit of a background on some of the techniques you'll see. And let's start off with that first topic in the outline. This is similar to what I guess Ben also started his talk on. This was a paper we published on hotspots. Let me see if I can use my laser pointer. Can you see that? Can you see the laser?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can
thank
see
you, thank you. Okay. So these are a variety of different systems many of you know about. The delta is the one of interest here with this group, but we've got blue carbon, permafrost inputs, fjords, upwelling zones, and so on. And so what do these systems have in common? And again, this is not something you don't already know, but mud is one of the things. And basically, Ed Devey, who was a professor at Yale, in fact, he was one of Evelyn Hutchinson's students. He wrote a paper on in defense of mud back in 1970, a more ecological perspective. Malakoff, who's an editor at Science, had a special issue with mud on the front cover that was more involved with some sort of catastrophic things and land use change and so on. And then, of course, many of you know about the cable bacteria, the electric mud, and this just came out last week, reflective of this paper that we have. It's Mud, Glorious Mud. And so in that paper, we talk about what is mud OC. And so if you look at the minerals, we have mud less than 63, sand greater than 63. When you look at this relationship, you'll see that the organic carbon goes up with the percentage of mud. That's very simple principles. And then once you start introducing carbon further into the system, you can get associations with it that are suspension, sediments, what Ben just talked about, mineral associated. And you also have discrete POC particles that are in this. So this is what we're talking about with mud OC. So mud rocks represent about 60% of all the sedimentary rocks and have been incredibly important in paleoclimate work, storing information for us. And much of this started after the evolution of land plants, vascular plants, and their ability to have deep roots, weathering. So this was post-Silurian is when you start to see this big transition from sand to these large mud rocks. Okay, so that's the introduction. The second area of the outline is some of these pathways. Savitsky had a paper in 22, and very nice paper that talks about the Anthropocene moving. He starts the Anthropocene in 1950, and he looked at it to 2010. And these are just various inputs across the landscape of fluxes. And essentially, the expectation is that we will actually have an increase in the sediment delivery by 11 to 16% in future years, but the deltas are, the big deltas in particular, are expected to decline, right? So, and that of course is related to the damming, but more broadly, you get this increase because of all this land use disruption to the biosphere. This is this paper that just came out that looks at various components of mud transport. And we have question marks here in terms of petagrams and pluses and some minuses of where things may be increasing or decreasing. You have damming here, you have deltas and so on. I don't want to belabor that, but essentially the different loadings in these different areas will have been dramatically altered, very much pivoting off of what Savitsky talks about in the landscape. And just in summary, sort of two bullets that we find from this work is basically the anthropogenic climate warming and has increased net fluxes of mud OC in most of these systems that you just saw on the map there, or the cartoon glaciers, permafrost, so on. With uncertainties for tidal flats and floodplains, we didn't find that the literature had very good constraints on that, and probably losses for coastal wetlands. But these other areas, we see increases in net fluxes. And the one thing that was sort of frustrating not to be able to constrain better is as you start moving mud around, does it increase or decrease its sequestration capability? And of course, that depends on very complex timescales and transient effects that were beyond our reach. So that is one of the things we're all struggling with. This is a very difficult figure to see. I apologize for this. This is degradation time. And this is apparent decay rate. And these are different systems. This is deep sediments, mixed sediments. And these are different time frames. The typical POC transport timeframes, thousands of years to days across different systems here, cross shelf, soil, LOAC systems. And then here, all of these different points represent, some of these are DOC from oceans, lakes, in terms of this apparent decay. Here are some of the timeframes that you see. This is degradation time, but you can see this is in days to years and hundreds of years and so on. And so out here, you see these are more of the sediments, with the ocean sediments out here, these smaller brown and orange lake sediments. And one of the things you see, I should say, by the way, that this, you can see the way this, how these numbers were determined. It was determined by a variety of different modeling methods, lab experiments, field experiments, based on first order decay rate. And again, this first order K is predicted from the respective times of the reactive continuum model. The reactive continuum model is a line here. There's two lines here. One is a dashed line, one's a solid line. The other line is the power model. And so, which is times exposure time, is indicated here. So that's what you have along these lines with different systems, different time frames. You can see over here, you can't see there's some orange dots in here, the lake sediments are. And you can see that they have higher apparent decay rates than the ocean sediments and starts to get into some of the decadal areas. And so I could spend a lot of time on this figure, and it's hard to see, so I won't. But another sort of bullet from this is, from that particular figure, is that the depositional environment's characterized by this very high turbulent kinetic energy, fast transport, are usually have a high apparent K, benthic organic matter reactivity, not surprising. It's related to oxygen and so on. But the one thing to remember when you look at that figure, which is very complex and there's a lot in it that you could easily argue against, is that you could shift that up and down, that particular regression, based on things like human effects of oxygen by eutrophication can slow things down. Priming effects can potentially speed things up if human effects are shifting labile material and mixing it with more refractory material. So we don't really account for that in there. But it is amazing that all of those different environments and different methods of looking at it are falling along that particular axis. So another thing that Ben mentioned and Bob Aller has been a leader on, and this is the notion of mobile muds. I know he spoke with this group at the original meeting. And again, that's another thing that can change as you start damming material and reducing the flow and supply and delivery of mobile muds. As Ben talked about with changing the climate change, you have shifts in coastal currents. And so moving these incinerators are another place where you can change the residence time of this mud OC and the burn rate and storage rate. In fact, we recently published a paper that was related to Wax Lake Delta, and you definitely see a big change after flooding events in terms of the particles with excess lead-210 and those without excess lead-210, reflecting a huge dilution effect of material. And so with this approach, we found that about 53% of the sediments coming in were deposited in large-scale flood events, and about 47% deposited with more routine, lesser flow dynamics. Why am I saying this? Again, this is another anthropogenic potential linkage with rerouting waters for floodgates and so on that's related to Wax Lake Delta, and also potentially larger and more frequent flooding events. The other thing we talk about in this paper is accommodation space. As you start moving mud to the coast, is there room for places to put it? And does that affect where mud gets stored? And so with something like a coastal, just see here, move this around. So you can see here with some of the blue carbon, we expect enhanced accommodation accretion due to relative sea level rise, with some accommodation space here. With the deltas, we may expect, and this again is looking at the literature, enhanced accommodation space from subsidence and changes, and so on. You can look at this for river dams as well as retreating glaciers. Here you have prograding delta coming in, and again, maybe more enhanced accommodation space behind the dam. I'll be talking about this in just a bit with some of this glacial melt and accelerated accretion from this retreat back with this proglacial area. So sediment transport ways have huge ramifications on future accommodation space for this medium of mud that I consider to be very important in controlling thermostat. The final area is the sources, transport, decay dynamics. How am I doing on time? Okay, notable example of how humans can alter the reactivity is what I just hinted about a minute ago. And that is in the Arctic with the release of highly reactive millennial age permafrost. So let's move to the high latitude. This is the Colville Delta. This is the Colville continuous permafrost, northern Alaska. You can see it meets out here or delivers into the Beaufort Sea. So we use this ramp pyrolysis method, which essentially you collect the PCO2, you run a ramp pyrolysis, you can see the temperatures here, you can see the CO2 curve, and then over here you can see the age of what's coming off in the carbon. So the idea is that the earlier the material comes off at a lower temperature that's more labile, and the later it comes off, it's older and more refractory. So it comes off younger, and later it's older. And what you see here is this is basically from 0 to 2 centimeters in the Colville Delta sediments. And here is up in the watershed, 40 to 100 centimeters deep. You find the permafrost down there. And essentially, we see that there's not much difference here in terms of what's getting delivered. So this was sort of surprising to us. And when you start looking up into the upper watershed, you can see this is some of the rivers that are delivering to the delta. They have massive bank erosion. And so this is what's allowing a lot of this permafrost to rapidly get transported. A lot of it's mud OC, again, to keep making the play on this particular medium to the coast. So another paper we have, I won't show you any data, just the same location, Colville, another student of mine used compound-specific isotope work. We looked long-chain fatty acids, and it spanned over about, in some cores, about 2,700 years, which revealed that this change in the delivery of permafrost has been happening for a while. You see basically a deepening of the mobilizable permafrost layers over the last 160 years after the Little Ice Age, if you're interested in reading more on that. So now let's stay on to this retreating glacier. You saw a picture of this schematic of this before, and how is this going to impact the delivery of mud and storage and in coastal systems? So what does this have to do with deltas? Well, you can see Kongsfjorden and Svalbard here. And this was the Kongsfjorden Glacier, you can see in 1948. And you can see the retreat that's happened here in, up to 2005. And here you see a delta. And so what starts to happen with this retreat and the change in the hydrodynamics is you start to get these formations of deltas. And so one of the things that I would also like to bring into the picture here is the notion of petrogenic material, not just permafrost, just as a reminder for those of you who may not have read much about that. This is 90% of the global organic carbon. It's in shales and kerogen and so on. It's basically what's at the bottom of a round bottom flask after you've hit it with everything. And so one of the amazing things, there was a paper by Steve Petch back in, I think, 2001. He was the first to sort of raise the idea that microbes can potentially be consuming petrogenic carbon. There were some problems with that, some of the labeling issues, but it still apparently turned out to be correct because he was arguing that they can. This recent work is quite amazing to me. when you look at some of these microbes up in this region of Svalbard, up to 55% organic carbon utilization by bacterial communities. So we'll see how this plays out in other areas, but it's quite remarkable to see this. So how does this terrestrially derived mud survive longer term transport? What I just showed you is very close to the delivery from river system. So Pat Hatch, well, I had a student when I was at Tulane look at this delivery from the Mississippi Delta out to the Mississippi Canyon. And we looked at lignin, and you would expect as you go from the river to the canyon that there's a decrease in lignin being a biomarker for vascular plants. And we saw an increase in the decay indices, the acid to aldehyde ratios. So that made perfect sense to us, but we didn't really know what happened after that. So we hooked up recently with Pat Hatcher and his graduate student, Sarah Ware, and basically we can see that if you look at the relative lignin to the distance from the river, this is from FTICR, again, pooling all these different molecules, and you can't quantify them, but you can use Van Crevlin diagrams. So we see that the lignin decreased, like I showed you a minute ago, and this FTICR agrees with our earlier data. Look at the del C13, notice it increases, and this is because of the transport of C4 carbon from eroding marshes off of Louisiana, all the way out to the canyon, which is quite remarkable. A number of people have argued with me about the role of these marshes in hypoxia and all of this other stuff, but you can see it's getting out very far. And again, you see a very nice relationship with FTICR and lignin. And then if you start looking at some of these Van Crevlin diagrams, this is river only, and this is canyon only, red and black. And the blue is what's conserved. What you get basically looking at the formula and similarity and between those two end members. So the formula indicate that basically unique to the river and canyon, 38 and 15% respectively, meaning that the majority of the formula, that is the blue, are actually persisting all the way out 92 kilometers from the river to the canyon. So we do see decay of lignin, but you still see this signal that's actually being preserved long distance. Now, recent work has shown, my final bit here, a few slides, recent work has shown that the burial of terrestrial carbon by turbidity currents is very efficient in the range of settings. And people were very interested in river canyons decades ago, and it was very difficult to measure anything with the instruments because everything would be destroyed because of how violent those flows can be. And Peter Palling has just basically revolutionized things recently in looking at this, and he basically has put this back on the map as another interesting topic. This is from a paper in Annual Reviews that sort of sets the stage on the importance of material coming in through these basically all the way out to the canyons and some of the fans, as we've seen with Valia Galley's work and other people in the Bengal fan and so on, its connection to the rivers there. The other thing you see in this paper just is looking at some of the efficiency at which you can bury terrestrial carbon. And of course, based on shelf width and sediment supply, you can see this change. But the numbers are quite high in terms of the burial efficiency. So if you look at this global sediment mass flux in the paper, this just sets up the scenarios. These are a lot of numbers that have already been in the literature for a number of years. And you can see how we're trying to sort of overlap these new numbers with sort of this work that's been accumulating. And essentially here you can see this is some of the global flux pathways. Again, I don't want to get into the specifics. And you can see here some of the turbidity currents are 60 to 90 petagrams, which is quite large, that we estimate from some of these recent papers. And Talling was insistent on calling it the turbidity pump. Oceanographers seem to have a love affair with using the name pump for everything. So we now have a new pump. There's a solubility pump, calcium carbonate pump, biological pump. And if we buy into this notion that these fluxes are that high, maybe there's a new pump that will be linked to this. And if you don't believe these numbers, take a look at this figure. This is from water that was in 3 to 4 kilometers. And these were fiber optic cables being repaired in South Pacific after a storm had occurred a few months back. And you can see how quickly material gets shunted out in these areas. This looks like something you'd collect in a salt marsh. And this is many, many kilometers from any land source. So, I mean, we've seen things like this with Taiwan as well, with wood transport, but it's quite remarkable to see it with sort of the softer, proper woody, larger chunks of it. So with that, I will thank you and take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was fascinating. And so now we have ample time for questions. So please raise your hand or feel free also to unmute yourself and ask questions to either Bin or Tom.
Hi, yeah. I have a question for Zhao Bin.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, Zhao Bin, you mentioned a much lower barrier efficiency of terrestrial organic carbon in the Bohai Sea and the Yellow Sea, and
in the East China Sea. Yeah, but in Bohai Sea and Yellow Sea, the terrestrial organic carbon barrier efficiency is high. Yeah.
But I saw the number is around 43%.
Yeah. You're right.
43 is way lower than the estimate from other papers from Meixun Zhao's team, because they use RPO analysis and they have molecular analysis, and their estimate is around 80% or even higher. So why they have like a 50% difference in your estimate?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, I think we use different methods because for me, we use like a bulk parameters to estimate organic carbon barrel efficiency. But the other methods, they often use like biomarkers or other things. They are different because in my view, the biomarker cannot represent the whole thing.
Okay,
it's just a part of organic carbon. But also for bulk organic carbon, it also have very large errors for estimation. Errors for estimation of barrel efficiency. So it's a different. So but I saw their papers. We both think like Bohai Sea and Yellow Sea, they have a higher organic carbon barrel efficiency compared to East China Sea mud area.
Okay, I see it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Yap, may I ask one more question for Tom?
Please, yes, feel free.
Yeah, it's also about barrier efficiency because we all know that turbidity current produce much higher sedimentation rate. And the sedimentation rate determine the barrier efficiency of organic carbon. But the organic carbon continue to be decomposed or remineralized after the first burial or after the first deposition. So Tom mentioned a much higher barrier efficiency with turbidity current. So how this barrier efficiency go with time?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think you've hit on something that is we're sort of struggling to think about, because you think of oxygen exposure time and trying to balance oxygen exposure time and sedimentation rate. And we're finding in recent work, there's a recent paper that just came out in Baltic Sea, and we have a paper that came out with some Swedish fjords where you have these fjords that have very different water column residence time and oxygen situation. And we still find that the control on the burial in those systems is more driven by sedimentation than oxygen. And so we thought it was going to set up this perfect scenario. It's not what our hypothesis would have been. And I don't know how that fits with the turbidity currents, but you're bang on exactly with this question that continues to rear its ugly head in oceanography, and that the oxygen exposure time versus sedimentation rate, separate from my real love, which is this quality of the organic matter. But if you just look at those two other parameters separate from the source of organic matter, it's complicated. And so I don't think we really understand that. And I think that's part of it, part of the big future for looking at this turbidity pump and how true it is and how widespread it is, if it's even accepted by the community to be a formal pump in the ocean system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a somewhat related question, I think. I'm not a geochemist, so this may be a very silly question. So I see a lot of these numbers about this burial efficiency, and I was wondering how much it is related to the methods that you use to estimate it. Because if I look at deltas, of course, you have seasonal cycles in sedimentation and erosion. You have decadal cycles. You might have daily cycles with tides. So how do you factor that in when you look at sedimentation rate, and then from sedimentation rates go to burial efficiency?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I can tell you that I typically stay away from things like burial efficiency for that reason. I mean, I showed burial efficiency in some of these papers, but I typically look at burial rates, and the efficiency term is something I tend to sort of sneak around. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I make reference to it. I'll be quite honest. I think it's very difficult to think how we can really constrain that very well with the variability, with the variable drivers that you're talking about, and how you compare apples with apples or not, because it just diverges so quickly when you start getting into the different physical drivers and so on. So I don't have a really good answer for that one. I think, as I said, I typically try to stay away from the efficiency, although we've used it in a few of our papers. So I'm sorry I couldn't answer that more. I think it's another really good question. I don't think it's a reflection of your lack of knowledge on your end. I think your both questions are hitting right on the real core questions to a lot of the organic geochemists. The thing that was quite remarkable to me, Jaap, was how the apparent decay rates were worked out on that power line model and so on across these very divergent systems. And so there's something very unifying going on there. And
Yeah.
Sandra Arndt was the one that really worked on that model. She's the expert that could speak to this much better than I can. That last figure that was not illustrated very clearly. But that's pulled from many, many people, Middleburg and a whole series of many different people that have done these experiments. And we were shocked to see it sort of play out on that power model. And so
Yeah,
So-
and all
so-
the measurement methods were also different, right?
yeah, the
Along
methods were
along
different.
these
and so
timescales.
yes, yeah. So there's something really fundamentally unifying there that we just sort of dance around it a little bit. We don't really answer what's going on. We just say how it's quite remarkable, and you can see some spread between the lake and ocean sediments that you can explain. Of course, the DOC from wherever it is much higher, the Ks compared to sediments. No surprise, because again, a lot of what Ben talked about with mineral associations. But the other thing with the mineral associations, I mean, Ben was talking a lot about the sort of the orthogenic, and so the whole idea of orthogenic minerals, whether it's the manganese or the iron oxides, I think that's turning out to be less important than just clay minerals and minerals that have much more stability, because as you put those other minerals through different redox phases, you can lose them, you can get dissolution of them. And
Yeah.
so it's important, but I think another thing, what I'm getting at with this is I still think it comes back a lot to where the clay particles or the mud is. That's kind of my theme of the whole idea of this being a medium that's been important, potentially from the origin of life to now, I think, almost acting as a mediator of activation energy and slowing things down. And I think it's very interesting in terms of how, if you look at it that way. To me, it is anyway.
Yeah.
I had similar, I'm sorry, Ben, who are you going to answer?
Oh, hi. Wait, who is that? I'm sorry.
It's Shirley.
Okay, I thought Marissa was, I looked at the wrong person.
I'm sorry, Ben, did you want to follow up on what Yap and Tom have been chatting about? Or did I interrupt you?
No,
Yeah.
no, I don't. Oh,
Okay, I couldn't hear what Shaylee said.
no,
Can you
I think
hear me okay?
Yeah, me
Okay,
too. I couldn't.
Maybe just as a follow-up point on that, it's not a question, but just an observation. So I'm also not a geochemist, but more on the sediment side. And I think these concepts surrounding mud and things you're talking about with mud also really relate to unknowns in the sedimentology of deltas.
Mhm.
It's and maybe Yap could comment on this more, but it seems like there's a lot more work on sand flux and sand sequestration and how sand contributes to building delta architecture. But if we as a sediment community look more at muds as well, then maybe that forwards these initiatives of understanding leaky deltas.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I don't know if maybe Yap can even comment on that far better than I can, but that was something that when I started talking to the people who were doing these models, and I started bringing up things about the importance of organic matter in the models, and most of them said, we're just not ready to even deal with that now. So that's going to have to be put on the shelf. So, but now that I've started talking to them, it seems like there's more recognition of not just the mud OC, but even potentially particulate material, although the mud OC would be the more long-standing parameter. The sort of detrital POC, I imagine, would just burn off in the time frames maybe that they're talking about. But yeah, I agree. I think that's something that's really, really needed with people I know that do those models.
To my
Hey,
mind,
Tom.
oh, sorry,
Yeah,
go
yeah,
ahead.
you. You first.
I haven't looked at this in a while, but it seems like Christoph Rabui's paper from the Congo was one of the only studies that had almost a complete sediment budget from river fluxes down to the submarine fan. And as I can recall, and again, I was looking very specifically at silica diagenesis. Will Barrelson, Will, you were online, I think, had some studies on the Amazon slope. So it seems like we have a lot of information. I'm speaking to the fire here, on shelf sediments, but we don't have that connectivity as we're saying to the slope in the deep sea. So just as I have many of you Delta curious folks here, would you say that this is one of our, I'm just querying the community here, one of the bigger questions? Would you say that this is one of the bigger questions that we have, is this simple, as let's put it, sedimentology and movement of mass? Do you think we have the answer to that, or do you think this is something that is a topic that we should, as a community, focus more on?
I think that's an important point, Shirley, and something I've been thinking about as I'm thinking about the Yukon Delta system, which empties out into a very shallow ocean where waves have a much bigger impact on resuspending material. And in contrast to another similar delta like the Mackenzie, which empties out into a trough, and you can have more sediment transport offshore into deeper parts of the basin. I think that we don't have a good handle on how those two types of, I guess, end members affect carbon burial rates. And so I think that would be an interesting point to expand on in our workshops and discussions.
Yeah. No, I agree. One of the things that I think with the as we advanced some of the mixing models, that keeps getting more and more refined from some of the Monte Carlo stuff that was done early on and so on. But the end members are really important. And so that's another thing that, you know, constraining that, and that can be challenging. But I think we see big improvements when we really pay more attention to that and make a better effort at that, because that's usually something that's kind of ancillary. We do the best we can, but literally getting out, getting in the watershed, making it more than an hour or two excursion from the ship. I mean, these things sometimes don't fit in with cruises and things like this. So I think that's hurt some of the models in the past, and I think people are paying more attention to that. And the models themselves are being improved.
Is anyone here working then off the shelf or working on models of sediment transport?
I cannot hear shit. Some of it's because I'm almost deaf, not really, but I don't hear very well. But maybe it's the microphone too. If someone could repeat.
Yeah, Shirley, I think you have a bit of an echo, but I think you're asking if anyone, you want to try again.
Is it better or worse?
It's the same.
Oh, okay.
Just speak slowly and.
Okay. Is anyone here who is online working on inputs to these models, these sediment transport models or carbon burial models in these areas that we have identified as bigger unknowns, or working with new methods that can quantify mass transport? I just was looking for a show of hands.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say is I proposed it, but they rejected it. What I wanted to do is the Del3D is a very common model to look at morphodynamics of deltas. And I want to couple it to a reactive transport model, because most of the time in my knowledge, but this was a couple of years ago, and perhaps I'm wrong, is that most of the models only allow for sedimentation. So when you think about the activity of waves on shallow shelves, of course, what you want is to have a dynamic surface that can go up and down, so erode and grow. So I wanted to couple that to Del3D. But and I don't think anyone here is from a funding agency, but I don't think that exists. So when I did the literature review for that, there was no model that coupled both. So that would be a very nice kind of methodological angle to go into.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sorry, I'm noticing a lot of people are leaving, and I wonder, Liz, if you would want to share the voting results of the voting before more people sign off and we continue chatting.
Yeah, sure. Let's take a look at that. Do you all see it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So here's our most popular responses. I'm actually just seeing this for the first time too, because it didn't let me look at it until I clicked to end the voting. So we have two top popular ones. It was a pretty small voter turnout though. So I think all the responses we got are good and interesting and things we can think about more. But the top ones are net burial efficiency of terrestrial organic carbon in deltas and regression and transgression. How does this impact the global marine carbon cycle? And then other responses are sediment mass balance, a predictive understanding of how different factors interact to influence carbon remineralization and burial, effective morphodynamic timescales in combination with carbon burial, missing carbon, storage over Holocene timescales, and feedbacks with delta growth, and net autotrophic or net heterotrophic.
Is that for me?
Yeah, can you please answer all of those for us now?
Hey, thanks.
Everyone here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with the deltaic stuff, I think one of the things I really didn't get into that is a whole other talk is the role of the blue carbon in stabilizing things and storing organic matter on the delta proper. And many of you know there's a tremendous interest in blue carbon now. And one of the things that I can tell you that we're working on related to this net ecosystem productivity and so on is that's very interesting. And if you look at the differences between mangroves and marshes, we're doing that here in Florida because mangroves are replacing marshes. And so pretty much up the entire, both coasts, up to almost Georgia. So that's really happening quickly. And it's interesting because when you start talking about net productivity with these particular systems, these emerging vegetation systems, so much of it is going on below. And so it's the below ground productivity. And actually something I never realized before is the recalcitrance of a lot of the root material. So when you look at the net productivity above and you look at mangrove leaves and you look at marsh detritus and you think about the storage, I would say more with the mangroves in particular, there are these compounds that are in roots that are very recalcitrant, and that's turning out to be quite interesting. It's not that people haven't known about below ground productivity. That's something that people who work in marshes have been aware of for many years from the classic work in Georgia and places like that in particular. But it's sort of this preservation capability has not been looked at. And so that's something I think that's very interesting. And the organic geochemistry community has some tools to look at that in terms of separating. How do you separate when you have a mud sample and there's nothing recognizable macroscopically and you're trying to figure out whether it came from roots or whether it came from the surface? So it's the same issue of why we use biomarkers for any question where you can't macroscopically see it, right? And so that's turning out to be a problem more than I ever thought. As you go deeper, you might think, well, the system's there, it's growing there. It's not nearly as difficult as taking a core offshore or even in the center of a lake because it's literally accreting. But you do when you go down core and you look at the samples in the lab, you'll see little root fragments and little sort of pieces of roots and things, but you still need to be able to separate out what came from the surface. And what we're finding is that there are some really interesting sterols that are associated with roots and not the surface leaves. So that's one thing I would say about some of this macro vegetation, wetland vegetation associated with deltas. I don't know if that really answered the question, Liz.
Well, Tom, in the shift in vegetation, is that because of like warming water, or is it elevation capital, or what's causing that?
It's mostly driven by temperature, and it's not the sort of the overall temperature annually. It's really more the frequency of freezes. So what's happened on the Texas coast, on both coasts around the Gulf of Mexico, is that the mangroves have moved up. They're in Louisiana. They've replaced marshes. The marshes are still living, but you can see these big swaths that have been replaced. And so we're trying to look at how that shifts the storage. Do you get more storage with mangroves or less? We know we get more protection. It affects the geomorphology differently than marshes. That's easy. It's a woody structure, but it's not so clear. You might think that it's a very simple answer with wood being buried more efficiently, but in some places it's not the case. So, but yeah, that's a good question. It's just basically fewer freezes, and they're moving up. As I said, they're now moving into Georgia, even outside of Florida.
Thanks.
I noticed it's 5:30 here, so it's beyond the time that we reserved for this webinar. So what I would suggest, and I see some people have to leave, so what I would suggest is to thank Bin and Tom again. I really enjoyed your talk, and I know that I'm speaking for everyone here. Please stay in the loop with Leaky Deltas. We'll have another webinar in a month or two, and more information will be shared to everyone that joined this one, joined the previous one, and will be shared through our channels. So thank you.
Thank you. It was nice to put some faces as well with names I know and I haven't met before. So it's nice to see some folks I have wanted to meet. So I look forward to interacting with you, and it was good to see my friend.
Same.
Mhm.
Okay.
I have a quick question for you before you log off. Don't mind. It's just about your super paramagnetic iron 3 association with reactive. You're talking about mostly ferrihydrite. Is that the phases you were talking about?
I think they are actually they are more, I think, goethite.
Good. Oh, good.
Because
Okay.
goethite is the most important component of iron oxide in the marine system. Yeah.
So the ferrihydrite and those other like siderite, those are just something that would come out before the diethionate leach. Those are just usually used up. You think?
Yeah.
They just don't
I think,
persist.
yes, for the ferrihydrite, actually they can be turned to like hematite or goethite with the time. So they are like ferrihydrite is more common in land soils, but in marine system the salinity change, and also it will experience a long transportation time. So it will change. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you. I wonder what the I wonder if you can combine. I wonder what the iron isotopic signatures are of these different pools for the super paramagnetic iron 3 versus your hematite pools. I wonder if there is some information that can be gleaned from the source material to whatever is buried. If you see some additional evidence of this iron shuttle, maybe between iron 2 and iron 3.
Yeah.
More of an electron transfer. Yeah. I don't know how you would do that technically or analytically, but someone's got to know, right? Like Silka or somebody. Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, thank you.
Yeah, it's we can get, I think I try to make a figure between like hematite and the super paramagnetic iron 3. I think there is a like a, it's very weak relationship between each other. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I have to run. Bye-bye.
Hi, Tom. Thank you.
Relative weathering
Thank
index
you.
can be used.
Oh, Fahim, did you have a comment?
I think iron relative weathering index could be used to find out the difference between iron positive 2 and iron positive 3. Iron relative weathering index is a technique which could be used to differentiate between that in sediment how much amount of the iron positive 2 or how much quantity of iron positive 3 is present. For example, in the oxidized conditions, the more iron positive 3 is present as compared to iron positive 2. And in this way, you can compare that your organic carbon is present with iron positive 3 in more oxidized condition, or either it is present in the reduced condition with iron positive 2. So the method that is used to determine this iron positive 2 and iron positive 3 is the phenanthroline spectrophotometric method to analyze this. You can study about this, the phenanthroline spectrophotometric method. Recently, a research paper is published by Zhao Li in 2024 in the American Chemical Society Journal. From there, you can get the information related to the conversion of the iron positive 2 into iron positive 3 or iron positive 3 into iron positive 2. So you can compare the quantity if in general way, if more iron positive 3 is present, then it means that the conditions are relatively oxidized and the organic carbon could be more degraded, because iron is in the iron positive 3, so it could be more degraded. If it is in the Fe positive 2 form, it should be less degraded. You can use the phenanthroline spectrophotometric method and read this research paper that I suggested you. Hopefully you will get some information.
What is the citation? American Chemical Society, and what is the last name?
Zhao Li 2024. Recently published research paper.
Okay.
It will help
Thank you
to find out the different redox condition, and it will also help you to find out the weathering state. If there is more weathered sediment, then it will be more Fe positive 3 condition related to like this. You can cite this research paper. Hopefully it will help you.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for staying on.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, May.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Good to see you, Ben. Say hi
Good
to the
to see you.
family.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.